You're listening to the official Minnesota Wild podcast, presented by Acrisure.
Now here to talk about the Minnesota Wild and the NHL. From the Wild, Kevin Fallness. And from the Fan, Brandon Molesky.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of KFAN Wild Weekly, our first post-trade deadline episode. I'm Brandon Molesky. He's Kevin Fallness from the Minnesota Wild Radio Network. And Kevin, good evening as always. And what'd you think of the trade deadline? The Wild definitely added some depth to the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody out there was looking for that big splash. I think you got that, though, a few months ago with Quinn Hughes. I don't know that you're ever going to top that. And then you look at the pieces that they got. I feel like they bolstered the depth of this lineup. And I like a lot of them. I like especially McCarron. Man, I think he fits so well in this lineup. And then Nick Foligno, there's not a better guy off the ice except maybe his brother, but you put them together in that line. I'm excited about some of these moves. I can't wait to see how it plays out over the final 17 games of the regular season.
It is kind of funny, like the timing of when trades are made, right? Like if that Quinn Hughes trade happened the day of the trade deadline as opposed to, when was that now?
Right around Christmas.
Yeah, a couple months ago. If that had happened, trade deadline, people are like, oh my gosh, we got Quinn Hughes, greatest trade deadline ever. And it's like, well, we already got our superstar, and he's one of the best players in the league. And to that point, when the trade was made, he splashed onto the scene, was fantastic. But he even said at that time, you like it now. Wait till we're 30 games in. If you got him at the trade deadline, he'd just be picking up steam as we got into the playoffs. Now he's had a third of the season under his belt, 30 games plus with the Wild, and the numbers speak for itself. I mean, the eye test is fantastic, but the numbers also tell you that those 30 games that he's been here has helped them establish themselves as one of the elite teams in the National Hockey League, and that's why they are where they are in the standings. When you and I both talked about the Olympics, right, and the roster construction from Bill Guerin, and the fact that there were some big names, big scores that were left off, like Jason Robertson, but that Guerin was trying to construct a team that you'd have certain roles slotted for all the different players, right? And clearly that worked for Team USA. They beat Canada to win the gold medal. And I kind of felt like that's what this trade deadline was about, right? Now, I still think ultimately in the next year or two, they still might try to go out and get a number one center and really cap this thing off. But guys like McCarron, right? And Foligno, how many times? And they know they're playing the Dallas Stars. And the last time we played the Dallas Stars, our penalty kill let us down big time, right?
Yeah.
And now you add McCarron and Foligno, who both can take draws from either side, right? And McCarron's the right shot. We saw it in Colorado the other day where McCarron goes to take the face-off, gets kicked out of the circle. Well, you have another guy in Foligno who's well-versed in taking face-offs, and they won the draw and they iced the puck, right? Both are great penalty killers. And they have just more depth now from a PK standpoint. This does appear to me like this is Bill Guerin doing that exact same roster construction of, hey, we got to have certain roles with our third and fourth liners.
Yeah, I think he would have loved to have made that splash with the top six forward and that number one center and really strengthen things down the middle. But the way the market was working, it didn't seem like that was in the cards. And there's still some big things to happen, I think, coming this summer, as you alluded to. But what they did here, they strengthened themselves. And, the strongest part of a tree is the roots, and that's what I think the bottom. Jacques Lemaire used to call them plumbers. I think these guys are more than just plumbers. I love the way Michael McCarron plays. 6'6", 232 pounds. I mean, he's just a monster out there. And I think if you put him in the middle of one of those bottom six lines, even if he's in the fourth line, and put a couple of strong, sturdy wingers on the side of him, this is going to make a real tough matchup for the Dallas Stars. Like you said, it's written in the stars. That's who the Wild are playing in 17 short games. You get into the postseason, and they're going to be a handful for Dallas, and it ain't going to be an easy out.
No, it definitely will be. They've been the hottest team in the league, other than maybe the Buffalo Sabres, over the last couple of weeks. Wild do beat the Mammoth 5-0 last night. They kind of get that Mammoth monkey off their back. And a pretty convincing win, I thought, from start to finish. And some of your big guys scored, but you also got scoring all over the place, including Bobby Brink in his home debut.
That was cool. And you know what's even neater about it? You don't need to have pretty goals this time of year. Anything counts. You bounce them in. But there were some fantastic goals. Kaprizov gets his own rebound and scores from his knees. The Urov goal was ridiculous. Yes. He undressed Uyghur and he cuts to the net. The Bobby Brink goal, I think, was a nice little wrist shot.
On the 2-on-1.
Yeah, I mean, there was just some fantastic goals last night. But regardless, they get the 5-0 win, and they continue this roll. 6-1-1 in their last 8 at home, 9-2-1 in their last 12 overall. Keep it going against the lowly Flyers tomorrow night.
They had some fantastic goals, but they've also had fantastic goaltending.
Yeah.
Philip Gustafson with the shutout last night. I thought Volstead played one of his best games of the year the other night in Colorado, especially with all the times they had to be stuck on the penalty kill. So things trending in the right direction for the Minnesota Wild. We talk with Kevin Gorg from FanDuel Sports Network. The K-Train. Choo-choo. All aboard for the K-Train next right here on KFAN Wild Weekly.
Loading one into open ice for the chase down to Tarasenko's, leaned on by Sean Durzi. Now J.J. Peterka. His pass hit a skate, turned over. Kaprizov, a shot hammered wide from Coke, get to it, and he scores! Oh, what a goal! Kirill Kaprizov from his backside buried his own rebound, and the Wild have a 1-0 lead.
Yeah, Wild win 5-0 last night. That was Joe O'Donnell, Tom Reed on the call on the Wild Radio Network. Heard last night on The Fan as the Wild finally take down the Mammoth by a score of 5-0. I'm Brandon Molesky. Kevin Fallness with me. Pleased to be joined on the television side of things from Kevin Gorg from FanDuel Sports Network. Good evening, Kevin. How you doing tonight?
Good evening, boys. Doing great. Enjoying the season and really starting to look forward to the postseason. This is, in my 20th year, without a doubt, the most talented team I've covered. There's a lot of juice right now around this Minnesota Wild club.
All right, how would you grade the trade deadline for the Minnesota Wild?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I'll just start by saying I didn't want them to move guys like Ryan Hartman or Jesper Volstead. So, in my eyes, they absolutely got better. You can't give them a straight A because they didn't get that top 6 forward that can play in the middle and can help on the power play, but I still love what Billy Guerin did. So I would probably go A-, and just looking at the depth they have right now, the size they've gained, and the way some of these new guys have contributed here in the first couple of games, I'm quite excited.
I want to take you away from the game itself. Well, kind of the game. Last night, anybody that watched the game knows that there was no LaPanta, no Gorg. It was a national broadcast. How do you watch a game that you're not doing? Are you in your living room? You got your jammies, surrounded by your 84 dogs? How are you taking in the contest?
I do it the same every time. I do watch in my living room. I pace most of the time. I stand when I'm working, wherever I am, on home games or away games, I'm pacing or walking or standing during the game, and I do drive those dogs you referenced, Fenway and Brooks, bananas because I'm always pacing. My significant other, Chrissy, she goes upstairs because she can't take it. And I watch, with a careful eye. I'm trying to figure out storylines for our next broadcast, and, they've got a ton of nationally televised games here in the back end of the schedule. I think the Wild have 17 games left. I think we're doing 11 of them, and I don't like it. I got to be honest with both you guys. Yeah. I much prefer to be working.
All I know is
Let me tell you this real quick, Brandon. Usually when it's a national broadcast, I love it because there's no one down there, in Gorg's words, clomping on me. I can take whoever I want, intermission, postgame. Last night they used 3 Wild guys, someone in each intermission and the postgame. I had second choice, and you weren't even there.
That's garbage.
All I know is
agree.
There's no national radio coverage. All I know is we get our local coverage every single game for the Minnesota Wild.
And regardless, every night we #MutinyTV.
KG, let's talk about the opponent last night, the Utah Mammoth, who going into the game had beaten the Wild by scores of 6-2, 5-2. There was a little bit of a feeling of maybe this team's got our number a little bit. Bad matchup for us. What changed last night for the Minnesota Wild?
Well, I think you caught the Utah Mammoth at the perfect time. They had played an overtime game in Chicago the night before, second of back-to-back with some travel. We've seen the Wild on that side of the equation. It's a tougher task, no doubt about it. In fact, the last time the Wild played Utah, it was the exact opposite, and Utah took charge of that hockey game. So I think the Wild had more energy, had more jump in their game. And I think, I'll be honest, in the first period, I thought it was a pretty even game. I thought Phil Gustafson, once again, was a real difference maker. And I think he did not have the Olympics he wanted for Team Sweden. He's come back, and every start he's given the Wild, starting back in Denver where he stopped 44 out of 45. He's been brilliant, and I almost cringe because I know how this goaltending thing works. You know, it's hard to sustain this for 6 weeks. I almost wish we were starting the playoffs in a week because it looks like both our goalies are trending in the right direction. But no, back to the question at hand, you know, the Wild, absolutely, with a team like Utah, who has all that speed and all that skill, can put themselves in a bad spot. But last night, I thought they were great without the puck. I thought their group of defensemen blocked a bunch of shots and really did a good job of taking away some of that space. You didn't see a ton of odd number rushes by the Mammoth, which is something that would always concern you when you play them. And then I just thought the Wild's skill players made big plays throughout the game.
I think you're right about the goaltending, and you being the goaltending guru, Gustafsson was great last night, but I think one of the most important starts of the post-Olympic schedule was Jesper Wallstedt in Colorado on Sunday, Gorgie. I don't think he's looked good in a while, honestly. His numbers weren't great in his last 6 starts, but I thought he threw up a gem against the Avalanche at Ball Arena. 34 saves. He needed that one, and you know, as much as we're going to rely on Philip Gustafsson, I think you need Jesper Wallstedt to be at the top of his game, and he showed he's still capable of it on Sunday.
You make a great point, Kevin. I think if we've gotten to know Philip Gustafsson, he's been at his best throughout his time in Minnesota when he's been pushed, when he's had to look over his shoulder and know that if he doesn't bring his best, somebody else is going to take that spot because he wants to be out there, he wants to compete. So with that being said, it felt like Jesper Wallstedt had a nice sigh of relief. Maybe he'll never tell us how much he was thinking about the trade deadline, and so much conversation locally and nationally about him being moved. And I know from getting to know Jesper that he really likes it here, does not want to leave Minnesota. So now you get to the other side of the deadline. He isn't moved. It just felt like he was a different player mentally in that game. You could argue that was his best start of the season, and he's had some really good starts. He's beaten the Avalanche now twice. And I just loved his game. I loved how mobile he was. I loved everything about the technical side of his game. He was in the right position. He was in the right spots. He made huge saves at key moments in that hockey game. And to have 2 guys going here in the final month is going to be big for Minnesota.
Now we're talking with Kevin Gorg from FanDuel Sports Network. You'll be able to watch him again tomorrow night when the Wild host the Philadelphia Flyers at Grand Casino Arena. I want to talk about a little bit more specifically about some of the players the Wild traded for. Obviously, we haven't seen Jeff Petrie yet, but Michael McCarron had 2 points in his opener versus Vegas. Bobby Brink looked like he tried to eat the boards last night, but then came back with a big goal in his first game in his home state. Nick Foligno, obviously, I don't know if you've heard, but he's brothers with Marcus Foligno. He was had pretty good on the penalty kill the other day for Colorado against Colorado. What are your first impressions of those 3 newcomers?
I'll start with McCarron because, to me, he brings a couple of things to the table that are going to be really important come playoff time. The size is obvious. He's physical. The rink shrinks in the playoffs. We know this. And so that size is going to be big. But I didn't realize, watching him in Nashville, how good a penalty killer he was, and then how important he can be in the faceoff circle. Those are 2 really critical areas for Minnesota, specifically on that dot. So I've been super impressed with him. Not one bit surprised with what Bobby Brink has brought to the table. We've watched this kid from back in his Minnetonka days. I had a chance to have a quick conversation with his old coach, Sean Goldsworthy, last weekend during the state tournament. And hearing some of the behind-the-scenes stories from Goldie on coaching this kid, knowing he won a state championship at Minnetonka, knowing he won a national championship at Denver. He reminds me a lot of a young Jason Zucker. He knows how to score. He's fast, and he can play in a lot of different spots in your lineup. What I'm blown away by is the fact that the Wild were able to get him for David Jiricek. And listen, I love David. He's a great kid. He cares a ton. It was never going to work in Minnesota. As soon as Billy Guerin went out and got Quinn Hughes, I think his fate was sealed here. And I think a lot of teams knew that. So once again, Bill Guerin, he did this back in the Kevin Fiala days, moving him for a first-round draft pick, and Brock Faber got the absolute most out of that. And so really impressed with him. The question I have for you guys is I handicap where we're going to be in April, and likely it's going to be Dallas. We see that.
Yep.
So you got Kirill, Hartman, and Zuki. You got Johansson, Eck, and Boldy. And I think Brink slots in nicely with Yurov and Tarasenko. So now I have written down the next 6 guys in line for 3 spots,
Yeah.
and I don't know how in the heck John Hines and his coaching staff are going to decipher with McCarron, the 2 Folignos, Sturm, Trenyon, who's been playing great, and of course, Robbie Fabry, who's a nice player. It's a great problem to have, but I don't know how you're going to see that play out. It's a huge question mark.
That was going to be my question for you, is the fourth line, because they did look so good last night. They combined for 13 hits. 9 of them went to Trenyon. But then you've got Foligno, Marcus Foligno floating around in the wings. In my mind, in theory, having McCarron in between the 2 Folignos would be outstanding. But I don't want Trenyon on the sidelines the way he's played, not only lately, but all season long. So this is a heck of a quandary here for John Hines.
We call it a good problem to have. We call it a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have, and I think with Trenyon, the hit leader in the National Hockey League, and by the way, it's not even close, a huge gap from his number to whoever's in second. So Trenyon, to me, in the playoffs is a no-brainer. That's why you brought him in. That's why you signed him to that contract. And John Hines and Bill Guerin have both talked about that. Marcus Foligno is the heart and soul of this hockey team. Now, we might not see him until the final week of the regular season. It just looks like an interesting problem to figure out. And what I would tell you is if I'm John Hines and that coaching staff, I remind players like Marcus Johansson, who's a terrific player, but again, at his best when someone's breathing down his neck, that's why having Bobby Brink, who can slide into that second-line spot and play with Matt Boldy. And right now, if you're an offensive player like Johansson or Bobby Brink, who would not want to play with Matt Boldy, there are a lot of carrots to dangle here, and I think it gives Bill Guerin's put John Hines and that coaching staff in a really interesting position where they can dangle some of this here down the stretch and then figure out in the final month here of the regular season who indeed is playing their best hockey. And most important, keep everybody healthy. I want them to have that problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, KG, by the time we get there, there's always a guy or two that's hurt. And that's the good thing of all these moves, right, is we have depth now that if we do have an injury or two, which is bound to happen, there's not going to be as big of a drop-off as maybe they had in the past. I wouldn't look – I know Vladimir Tarasenko's had a pretty good season, and even Yurov, I think – with all this depth now, even those guys have to play their way into the lineup to get in the postseason. Obviously, Yurov was really, really good last night. That goal was terrific.
I agree, and he's made some real strides this year, and I think we're just scratching the surface. When you watch him on a daily basis, see him at practice, see him at morning skate, this kid's got all kinds of skill. It reminds me a lot of those first couple of years with players like Eck, players like Pierre-Marc Bouchard, where you're watching these guys, and the numbers aren't going to blow you away in that first year, but you see the talent, and then you're kind of looking at what could be here. I think we saw another, again, fine example of that goal he scored against the Mammoth last night. He's going to be, I think, before it's all said and done, a guy that can score 20 to 30 goals. It's not going to happen here, might not even happen next year, but there's a lot of flexibility that Hines has with this roster right now, and you can move a lot of guys around. Brink can move around. Yurov can move around. We've seen Tarasenko move around. Johansson can go up and down. And then, again, Robbie Fabry's kind of got lost in the shuffle here, but the little I've seen in a Wild sweater, I like, and I think you guys have talked about how good a year Trenyon's had, and then I come back to Nick Foligno. Again, limited data here, but what I've seen so far, this guy can play. They're getting chances when he's on the ice. So I really do like the depth that Minnesota brings to the table. It's almost, though, cringeworthy every night when I look at the standings or the scoreboard, because Dallas doesn't have Rupe Hintz. They don't have their best player in Mikko Rantanen, and they just keep winning. 12-0-1 in their last 13, and as good as the Wild are, and they are dramatically better now than they were at the start of the year, if you start the playoffs right now, they're an underdog in that series in the betting mark.
Let me ask you this then, as we wrap it up. The last few games have been unbelievable with the playoff intensity, beating up against Tampa Bay, going up against the Knights, the Avalanche, last night against the Mammoth. You look at what's coming up here, including Thursday in St. Paul against the Flyers. The next 3 games are against teams that are not going to the playoffs. They're the bottom 5 teams in the Eastern Conference, and the Flyers, the Rangers, and the Leafs. How do you keep up that intensity that we've enjoyed the last few games against teams that, probably don't warrant a lot of intensity?
Well, you make a good point, because we do remember a couple of Sundays ago, the Wild as a heavy favorite at home losing to the St. Louis Blues. And so Minnesota all year long, to me, has elevated their game when they played the best competition, and they've had some struggles against teams that maybe weren't as good. And so this will be the challenge this week. I think the fact that Dallas keeps winning and they're trying to get home ice certainly will keep them motivated. And then what we just talked about, John Hines has the flexibility to move some guys in and out of the lineup, to try some different combinations, but also to motivate guys to earn that ice time, because you've got this stretch of hockey right now where you go Philly, the Rangers, and Toronto at home. 3 games and 4 nights this weekend. Then you have a home and home with the Blackhawks. You have 5 straight games against non-playoff teams. But then after that, a showdown at home against Dallas on the 22nd, and then a road trip that takes you to Tampa, Florida, and Boston. That's where the rubber meets the road. And so super important for Minnesota to keep playing like they did last night, keep playing like they did last week in the games you mentioned, where they were great against Tampa, Colorado, and Vegas.
KG, you're the best. I always enjoy talking to you, and I can't wait to see you on my television screen tomorrow night.
Yes, mute Fallness, more KG, please.
Thanks, KG.
See ya, big boy.
He's
Thanks, guys.
Kevin Gorg of FanDuel Sports Network. Wild back on the television tomorrow night on FanDuel Sports Network, 7 o'clock. But, of course, you can also listen to it with Kevin Fallness, Joe O'Donnell, and Tom Reed right here on the Fan pregame at 6:45, Kevin.
You can and you should. Tom Reed is back. It was great having Alex Stalock along for the ride for a handful of games, but Tom was back Tuesday night. He's back again Thursday and beyond, so good to have the band back together.
All right, thanks, Kevin. We'll talk to you next week.
Yes, you will.
Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of KFAN Wild Weekly. We'll talk to you next week.
For an extraordinary advantage in sports, you need a game plan. For an extraordinary advantage everywhere else, all you need is Acrisure. With a high-tech human approach to insurance, cybersecurity, and more, Acrisure helps you take care of what you care about. That makes winning easy. See what Acrisure's extraordinary advantage can do for you at Acrisure.com.